Hello and welcome to the latest Talking Transport podcast from London Travel Watch. Today we're going to be talking about the most used form of public transport in London and around the UK, the humble but mighty bus. But before we do that, I think I should introduce myself and also introduce you to our special guest. My name is Trevor Rosenberg. I'm a Policy and Advocacy Officer here at London Travel Watch. Part of my role is to research and campaign for a better bus experience for passengers. If this is the first time you've watched or listened to one of our podcasts, and you may not have heard of London Travel Watch before, we are London's independent transport watchdog, and we aim to make travelling around London better for everyone. That includes all passengers of Transport for London bus services. I'm very pleased today to introduce you to Claire Walters. Claire is the Chief Executive of Bus Users UK, and she's also the Disability and Access Ambassador for the bus and coach industry. It's great to see you, Claire.
Hi Trevor, thanks for asking me. I've actually just finished my stint at Disability and Access Ambassador and been succeeded by the wonderful Victoria Garcia, Brighton and Hove Bus. Knows everything there is to know about accessibility, so I'm delighted about that.
Actually, maybe to start with, maybe you'd like to talk about that role, if you're really important, and kind of how you got into it and kind of what you've learned and the experiences from that.
Well, I've learned it's almost impossible to organise anything with a cabinet office. That's a good start. But it was quite a useful thing to have as a title, because it recognised the work that Bus Users UK does for accessibility and kind of valued that. And it also introduced me to lots of people from other industries. And there was a bit of crossover with some of that. There was a guy who was working with tourism, so we did a little bit of a joint effort on coach and making sure coaches could actually pull up very close to whatever it was they were visiting to offload, particularly people with mobility problems, next to or near the site that they were visiting, which wasn't always easy to arrange because they want to keep coaches out of the main parts of the city often, but it's an incredibly important mode of transport for people. So yes, there was that. There was all sorts of speaking invitations that seemed to come along with that. So it was good for us to be able to talk to new audiences about the bus as an engine of inclusivity, really. So there's nothing humble about buses.
And as Bus Users UK, you've been Chief Executive for more than a decade now. So I'd be interested to know kind of what, for those who may not know so much about Bus Users UK, what the role of the organisation is and what work you've been doing.
Well, you look after passengers' comfort in and around London, and we do pretty much everywhere else, apart from Northern Ireland, which has its own consumer organisation. So our work falls into three strands, really. We deal with customer complaints, which is where a lot of people come to us. And what we do, it's a legal role called Alternative Dispute Resolution Body. So if you complain to a transport operator and they give you a rubbish response or they just don't respond, then you can come to us and then we'll try and stamp our feet and get you through the door or get a response that makes sense and try and find an outcome that you can both live with. So that's pretty important, and we get thousands of those, as you do. And then we also do a different role in Scotland and Wales, which is a compliance role. So we check around 5% of all bus services throughout those two countries, including, much to the startlement of the operators, the Orkney Islands, the Shetland, all that kind of stuff. That came as a bit of a shock to them. They weren't expecting us to get that far. And we have basically undercover people who go out and check that things are running on time. And if they're not, then we talk to the operators, find out why. Sometimes there's perfectly legitimate reasons. But if they're not telling people about them, that doesn't help the passengers understand or to plan. And if they're belligerent about it, then we can take it to the Traffic Commissioner, who has proper powers to haul them before them in a kind of court setting. And nobody wants that. We just want to solve the problems, really. We're not interested in slapping operators, unless it's the only way to get things done. So anyone who knows me knows I'm not much of a diplomat, so nobody wants me phoning them saying you're doing things wrong. And then the third thing is really advocacy. just trying to make sure that people understand how vital bus services are for people to have access to life, really, life's opportunities, education, employment, leisure, tourism, all the aspects of our lives that maybe those of us who have the option of driving take for granted. But actually there's more than a quarter of the country where people have no access to a car at all. So what are they supposed to do? And frankly, if you drive a car and there weren't any bus services, then there'd be an awful lot more congestion on the roads. So you want as many people as possible to be taking public transport, any other kind of sustainable mode, and leave the car as the kind of last resort.
And I understand it's a particularly special year for Buses UK this year?
It is. It's our 50th anniversary this year. Started as a sort of kitchen operation by our founder, Caroline Calm, when she realised nobody was really listening to what passengers needed. So she started this off at home. And 50 years later, here we are. Still doing the kinds of stuff she needs. She's still doing well, for anyone who knows Caroline Calm. She was organised in the sense of getting people together, but she did a degree in anarchy. So there was quite a lot of organisation structurally to do when I first came in. But we're a lovely, smooth running engine now because we've got a fabulous team of people. Hence me disappearing.
And it's September, and that's in itself a particularly important month for Buses UK. It's Catch the Bus month.
It is Catch the Bus month, yes. And anyone who doesn't know that, there are lots of bargains, lots of goodies, lots of freebies. Anybody who wants to go out and try a bus, if you're not used to doing so, all the bus companies are falling over themselves to get people to try a bus in September. Lots of kids will be going back to school, except in Scotland where they're already back. And it's a good time. If you haven't been on a bus since you were at school and it clanked and belched fumes and all that kind of stuff and was hideously uncomfortable, now's the time to try it because there's lots of nice, sleek, fancy Wi-Fi, all that kind of malarkey. But buses are much better than they used to be, and they're much more comfortable, and actually there's really good value normally.
Yeah, that's one of the things that in London we've had the Hopper Fare and the daily cap for several years, and to 2023 there's been the kind of the single fare cap to the price. Yeah. It's interesting from London, it has helped with demand. Interesting your experience from outside London, how things have gone with that cap and maybe what you think will happen with that in the years to come. Is it affordable to be maintained? If it is, what level could it go up to, or do you think maybe the cap might end up perishing?
OK, 7 questions in one. Thanks, Trevor. I think the fare cap, certainly the £2 fare cap, had a massive impact on people feeling confident. Confidence is everything when you're using public transport. You need to know that it'll get you where you want to go, that you can get on it, that there might be a seat even for those of us who are cracking on a bit. And you need to be able to budget for it, because not that many people are awash with cash these days. And the £2 fare cap really encouraged a lot of people who were occasional users to use it more. The £3 change, and I'm still not entirely sure why they put it up by £1, other than it's a new government and therefore we've got to do things slightly differently. We were appalled by the lift to £3, to be honest, because imagine if people went to a petrol station and they put the cost of petrol up by 50% overnight. They'd have a meltdown. But they did it to bus passengers with very little warning. So we weren't impressed by that. People have managed to adjust to that in the main. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And others have investigated what concessions they can get, because there's quite a lot of those around as well, for different groups of people in different parts of the country. But actually what I think is really encouraging about it is that the numbers of passengers starting to get back up to what they were before COVID. So I think it would be a really foolish decision to change it at all, other than to bring it down. And actually I think we can't afford not to cap buses. There's no legal requirement to provide buses, apart from for schools and that sort of thing. But I think it's nuts because, we have a climate crisis. We're encouraging everybody to cycle more, walk more, drive less. So people have to have an alternative. And in most towns and cities, the bus is the clear alternative. Railways are very expensive to build. They're great where they are, but sometimes they go to a really weird part of the town that you're, for historical reasons, and you can't just divert a railway. So I think bus is the obvious way to make sure people have a good alternative. And I think you need to put those bus services in place before you start taking away free car parking, those sorts of things. So park and ride, yay, let's go with more of that. But I'm afraid you're going to have to prioritise bus over cars in most places if you want to make a real difference.
And from your experience inside London and outside London, obviously interesting to get your perspective on what kind of the main differences you think you can see from over the years?
Over the years, I think the role of bus has become more recognised by people in local authorities everywhere, particularly now that they're talking about local authorities taking ownership of the buses, which is a bit of a... it's not actually true. They're not actually taking control of the buses. They're just tendering all the services. So still the same bus companies. So I'm not sure it actually changes a whole heap unless there's lots of money to go with it. And that's part of the problem. There's not always a lot of money to go with it. So in London, there's a sort of understanding that buses are vital for London to keep moving. Nobody argues with that. Outside, that's becoming less and less of an argument now. There are some counties, like Cumbria, where they still have no funded services at all, apart from the statutory ones. But it's just very difficult to imagine how anything's going to be achieved if we don't recognise fully the role of buses. And I'm happy to see that that's changed quite a lot. Since I've been in 13 years. It's a long time. And I think it's really important for people to recognise that buses are not an option, really. They're a vital part of the life, the bloodline of the town. You can't get about without buses carrying lots of folks. So I would like to see it become a statutory requirement and have ring-fence funding specifically for it. And we're a bit of a way off from that now. It'd be interesting to see what happens in Wales. It's a bit of a shambles at the moment, but they keep talking about having all Wales covered by a kind of single transport authority. But again, I'm not sure where the money's coming from, because as far as I'm aware, there isn't a big bucket load of money heading towards Wales any more than they've had before. There's this thing called the Barnett formula, which they're supposed to give everybody in Wales and Scotland, whatever, some kind of equitable share of the revenue that government pulls in, so that it's kind of per capita. But, there are places where it's much easier to run buses than some others. If you're trying to provide services in a hilly, not very well inhabited part of Scottish hills or Welsh mountains, it's a different proposition from having a hopper bus going to Tesco's from the centre of whatever your town is. So, yeah, I think there's still a long way to go, but I think what's clear is priority for buses has crept up the agenda and people don't turn their nose up at you now. Used to be a complete Cinderella subject where nobody wanted to talk about it. But there's one sure way of seeing how important a bus is to take it away, and then everybody goes nuts.
Interesting, you were talking about TfL, where it's kind of in London, the recognition of the bus as being vital. Do you think there's other things that perhaps operators, whether they're kind of municipal or kind of private companies, can learn from the TfL? Because try to appreciate that TfL, the size of the city,
yes,
and a lot of places aren't replicated like that, but are there other kind of general things that TfL do that perhaps could be replicated in other areas?
Well, I think there's better recognition, although not always in London, that transport modes interconnect with each other. So most people in London don't live right next to a station or within 5 minutes walk, so they're usually catching a bus to get to a station. So I think it's something that other larger places could certainly understand is that, yes, they might have a service that takes you to the station, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where the bus comes in and the train has gone like 30 seconds, a minute before. Because even when the same group is running the bus and the train, they don't talk to each other. So I think that kind of integration has also grown, that need. And I think London's done it for longer, had more money to spend on it, more political will, and more understanding of how disastrous it is if they don't. So a little bit ahead of the curve, but I think a lot of that can be solved, unfortunately, with more money. So where's it come from? I don't care. Just fund it. You can fund all sorts of things if you want to. So certainly, let's make sure we fund transport.
Well, that's interesting then to get that perspective. So just flipping it around then, what do you think that TfL can learn kind of from those operators?
Well, I think one of the painful lessons that a lot of operators have had to learn is that it's all well and good providing buses, but if the people who plan them and run them don't actually travel on them, they're never going to really understand what their customers want, need, loathe, love. They're not going to do that. So some of the best operators spend a lot of their time getting people on the buses from the boardroom down. Okay. So not just the odd person with an interest in accessibility or person in planning. You need to get the boardroom to travel on the buses. With all the franchising coming in, local authority members and staff who are involved in the planning of buses should be travelling on those buses. Being my draconian self, I would say that no councillor who's got a transport brief should be able to claim back any personal mileage. They should get free travel on the bus and attend all meetings. And if they can't attend meetings because the bus services don't work, they'll have learnt something. And I think that's something that's much more prevalent outside of London. I mean, there are obviously some people inside London using the buses just because it's the easiest way to get around. But there are plenty who don't and won't. And I can't understand that. If they have a responsibility for something, it's like, I don't know, trying to organise a school conference and then never speaking to any teachers or pupils. It's bonkers. So get out on the bus. It will tell you far more than any consultancy report will.
Actually, just continuing about London, so London Travel Watch hosts the London Bus Alliance, so that's a group of interested organisations and representatives who, big fans of the bus, recognise, as you mentioned about that, the bus is so important to so many people for so many different reasons. And we've been calling for TfL to take urgent action to reduce journey times so that the buses will be better for other people. And TfL have had their bus action plan in operation for 3 years now, with lots of different things that they're working on. We're still not quite sure that they're going to meet the targets they set themselves for improvements by 2030. So I'd love to know how your view is of the buses in London, both the good and the bad in the recent years.
Well, obviously there have been some interesting innovations in buses in London. The Superloop being the most recent one, a kind of M25 of bus routes around the capital, so you don't have to go in and out again, which is expensive and unnecessarily clogging up the central London stations and whatever. So the concept, fantastic, hasn't yet fulfilled its complete purpose because some of the loops are not part of a loop. If you're going to pick a name like Loop, it needs to join up. And I am well known for banging on about the Superloop element that stops at Grove Park when Bromley, where two other loop sections start from, is only a mile away. And that seems nuts to me because why would you make people then find their way on another service from Grove Park? So there's a few elements that don't quite match up on the Superloop, but conceptually it's a really good idea. I think there's still a bit of snobbery associated with bus travel outside London. But I think inside London, it doesn't even dawn on people that there's something down market about buses because vehicles clearly aren't. I mean, we still have some of the Boris bus things lumping around, the strange new route masters. I think they're selling most of them off elsewhere now. It's not a very comfortable bus. There's an awful lot of backwards facing seats, and it just looks like a vanity project, as if that might have been an option. So yeah, I'll be glad to see the back of those. But the Alliance itself, I think, brings a lot of experiences together. Those of us on the Alliance live in different parts of London, and we are exposed to an awful lot of different things. There are some councillors that attend. There are various people who come who have very different points of view. So if you have somebody like a passenger rep saying, why doesn't this happen? You've got someone else who said, well, I think the reason behind it is this. And then we decide whether or not we should or could do anything about it to address that problem. But we can at least pull up an awful lot of things and get them examined in the light that people in the authorities don't necessarily see for themselves. So I think it's a really important grouping. And I've learned a lot from it, so I'm hoping I've given something back to it. But I've definitely learnt a lot from a lot of the other people.
No, it's definitely true, yeah. There's lots of things that we work to do everything we can for buses at London Travel Watch, but obviously getting that intelligence from other organisations, other kind of political side of things, it's great, as well as the kind of contact we have directly from passengers, just to see what's going on out there, the good things and the things that can be improved. So as much intelligence as we can get is always welcome.
And accessibility, even in London, it still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of depressing in that sense, but then the infrastructure's older in London than in many other places. So there's this real balancing act to do to try and think, how can we make things more accessible from the start in future, so you're not building up problems for the future, but actually addressing the problems we've got now. That's an expensive and difficult thing to do, but it's essential.
And engaging with
people.
The users who have that at the earliest possible stage, that co-design is so important to not have to then retrofit or just try to sort out problems later stage.
I think co-design or co-production should be the next word of the year, because honestly, without it, you're going to make some terrible choices.
So in kind of like, if you had a magic wand and you say, okay, in 10 years' time, the bus network would look like this, what if you could only change one thing with your magic wand, what would it be?
Well, probably if I could only change one thing, then funding. But I think one of the biggest things they could do, really, is the concessionary pass system. At the moment, it's a real postcode lottery. The application process is higgledy-piggledy, so even in one county you might have to fill in 3 different forms to go across the county to do things. And it makes no sense. It also makes no sense. We're all talking about removing barriers to travel. That's an obvious one, just having these ridiculous bureaucracies. But there's also these artificial borders. We live in Great Britain, most of us. Northern Ireland is different. They allow people to use their bus passes to go into the Republic or into Northern Ireland. In the UK, you can only use an English concessionary pass in England, a Welsh one in Wales and a Scottish one in Scotland. We're all Brits, aren't we, supposedly? So, the NHS, we have a back office admin. We can do that. If you're ill in Scotland, you don't have to go back to England to get treatment. And if they can do it for the NHS, why can't they do it for buses? It's all, everything is possible nowadays with data management. So stop putting up artificial borders. I don't know if that's one.
No, it's good. And if you had that your magic wand said, okay, I can do one thing in London as well, apart from extending your super loop from Grove Park to Bromley, is there really one particular thing you do for London?
I think I would try, and I'm sure it's not easy, I would try to have drivers given the same routes most of the time. So they get to know some of their passengers and people start to feel more bonded with their regular routes. Because I think it makes a big difference, including for the drivers, if they see familiar faces and friendly faces and have a bit of a wave and a chat and whatever. It makes life easier for everyone. And it also, I mean, there is still this business of 1 in 4 people in London catch a bus every week, once a week, just to have human contact, because it's a big place to be lonely in. So I think buses are a real social saviour. So if you could see the same drivers at different times of day, you know, you might have a morning and an evening, but they have all these split shifts and people working funny hours and struggling through the traffic while dealing with e-scooters. But no, I mean, it's a stressful job being a driver. So I think if you could make it easier and the atmosphere friendlier, then there'd be... Plus, you'd have the people who try and con their way on without paying. They'd have fewer opportunities, because I said, you said that to me last week, mate. You said that to me Monday. Whereas at the moment, it's fractious for a lot of drivers having to deal with people who are not necessarily part of the team, if you know what I mean. They're not playing the game straight. So that's what I do, give people the same routes, mostly.
Okay, interesting idea, yeah. And you touched upon, sadly, that for those of us in the bus world, that you're going to be retiring very shortly.
Oh, nothing sad about that.
So have you got any plans
Oh,
laid
God,
out?
I've got bundles of plans. I've got lots and lots of them. I'm going to be travelling a fair bit. And when I was young, I had an interview with a university that did a French degree, which is what I did, which meant you could spend a year in Martinique. But it was an awful lot of history in that course, and I decided not to take it. But I've always had a yearning to see a bit of the French Caribbean. So that's on my list to do as well. Plus, I've got a book idea in my head, which will probably never come to fruition because I'll be too busy distracting myself with other fun stuff. But no, I can leave bus users in the very safe hands of Lydia Horbury, who's my successor, who's been our Director of England for a couple of years and done amazing things. So I can't wait to see how she takes bus users forward. I think she'll be amazing.
It's been great to speak with you, and we wish you a very happy retirement.
Thank you.
If you'd like to find out more about London Travel Watch, then please do visit our website, sign up to our newsletter, and keep an eye out for our next podcast in November.
If you don't want to know a bit more about Bus Users UK, and certainly if you've got ideas for things to do for Catch the Bus Month, please look at our website, www.bususers.org, and then you'll see everything we've got to offer. Please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
But for now, thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast, and goodbye.